I've spent more nights alone in the woods than most people spend in their entire lives. So when I tell you something was wrong on that ridge, I don't mean I got spooked by a deer. I don't mean I heard a fox scream and mistook it for a woman. I mean something looked me dead in the eyes and copied every move I made. A few years ago, my wife and I bought 40 acres tucked against the Appalachian Mountains. It was the kind of property people dream about when they're tired of noise. No neighbors close enough to see through your windows. No traffic except the occasional truck on the highway. Just woods, hills, and a narrow creek that cut behind the house before disappearing into the trees. I worked as a utility line inspector for almost 12 years, so remote places didn't bother me. I'd spent plenty of mornings hiking power lines before sunrise, walking through forests so quiet you could hear your own jacket brushing against branches. I knew black bears, I knew coyotes, I knew bobcats. I knew the sound of raccoons fighting, owls calling, deer blowing, foxes screaming. I knew what belonged in the woods. That property had an old white house, a collapsing barn, 2 fenced pastures, and an old stone well behind the back porch. The well had been sealed off years ago with thick wooden planks. The previous owner told me it hadn't been used since the 1950s, but even in dry weather, the ground around it stayed damp. I didn't think much of it at first. Old mountain properties are full of weird little things. For the first couple of weeks, everything was normal. Then I started feeling watched, only before sunrise, never during the day, never in the evening. Always in that dead space between night and morning, when the world feels like it hasn't decided what it wants to be yet. I'd step outside with my coffee, and the second my boots hit the porch, every hair on my arms would stand up. I'd look toward the ridge behind the barn. Nothing, just trees. But I could feel something up there, not moving, not hiding, watching. One morning, I stopped at this little country store about 15 minutes from the house. There were 3 older men sitting outside with coffee, talking about deer season. One of them asked where I'd bought land. When I told him, all 3 went quiet. The oldest one looked toward the mountains like he could see my property from there. Then he asked, "You hear anybody talking up there after dark yet?" I laughed because I thought he was messing with me. "No." He nodded once. "Good." Then he took a slow sip of coffee and said, "If you ever do, don't go looking." I asked him what he meant. He looked at the other 2 men. Neither of them said a word. Then he leaned forward and lowered his voice. "People around here have a name for it. I was told not to say it out loud, so I never asked." He stood up, tossed his coffee cup in the trash, and said one last thing before walking inside. I just obeyed. I laughed it off. I wish I hadn't. About 2 weeks later, I woke up around 4:40 in the morning. My wife was still asleep. The house was silent. I got dressed, poured coffee into a travel mug, and stepped onto the back porch. The air was cold enough that I could see my breath. The creek was running somewhere behind the barn, soft and steady. Then I heard voices. At first, I thought it was the radio in my truck, but my truck was off. Then I thought maybe somebody was walking down near the road, but the voices were coming from the ridge. 2 people, maybe 3, talking, not whispering, not yelling, just having a conversation. The strange part was I couldn't understand a word. It was like the sound was almost language, almost English. Every sentence came right up to the edge of making sense, then slipped away. I stood there for maybe a full minute, listening. Then I saw a light near the top of the ridge, small, white, moving between the trees. That changed everything for me. Now I wasn't thinking folklore. I was thinking trespassers, hunters, maybe teenagers, maybe somebody checking out the property. So I grabbed my rifle, clipped on my headlamp, whistled for my dog, Duke, and headed toward the tree line. Duke was a big shepherd mix. He barked at squirrels, mailboxes, plastic bags, his own reflection. But that morning, he didn't make a sound. That should have stopped me. It didn't. We crossed behind the barn, past the old well, and started up the ridge. The woods got thick fast. Briars caught on my jacket. Branches cracked under my boots. The light ahead kept moving, slow and steady, like whoever had it wasn't in any hurry. I shouted, "This is private property!" Nothing. The light didn't stop. I shouted again. Still nothing. Duke stayed right beside me, not pulling, not sniffing, not growling, just walking with his head low. After maybe 15 minutes, I got close enough that I could see the light flickering through the trees. Then it shut off. Just gone. The woods went completely black. I stopped. I could hear myself breathing. I could hear Duke breathing. And somewhere behind me, faintly, I heard the creak. Then something clicked in the dark. Not a branch. Not an animal. A wet, clicking sound, like someone tapping their tongue against the roof of their mouth. I raised my rifle and swept my headlamp across the trees. Nothing. Then my light caught two eyes. Green, big, too high off the ground. I froze. At first I thought it was a bear standing upright, but the eyes didn't move like an animal's eyes. They locked onto me. I shifted my weight to the left. The eyes shifted left. I moved my head right. They moved right. Perfectly. Not like something following me. Like something copying me. I lifted my left hand. One long, pale arm lifted in the dark. My stomach dropped. I whispered, "What the hell?" The thing tilted its head. So I tilted mine. It tilted its head the same way. Perfectly. No delay, no hesitation. For one stupid second, my brain tried to make it normal. I actually said out loud, "Is that a mirror?" The thing slowly shook its head. No, that was the moment fear hit me. Not nerves, not adrenaline. Fear. Deep, primitive fear. The kind that makes your body understand something before your mind can explain it. I raised the rifle to my shoulder and said, "You take one step toward me, and I'm dropping you." The thing lowered itself behind the brush. I lost the eyes. I racked the rifle. The eyes popped back up, higher this time, and that's when I saw more of it. Tall, thin, wrong. Its body looked almost human, but stretched out. Arms too long, shoulders too narrow, spine bent in a way that made my skin crawl. It looked like a person who had forgotten how people were shaped. Then it smiled. I couldn't see teeth clearly. I just saw the shape of the mouth change, wide, too wide. Duke still hadn't reacted. He was staring at the ground like he couldn't see it. That scared me almost as much as the thing itself. I started backing down the hill, slow, one step at a time. "I'm leaving," I said, like an idiot. "You stay there." The thing watched me, then it dropped to all fours, fast. Not like an animal, like a person falling forward on purpose. Then it bolted to my left, not away from me, around me, trying to flank. Branches snapped so fast it sounded like something running through the woods on 4 hands instead of 4 feet. That broke me. I stopped trying to look tough. I backed down that hill as fast as I could without turning around. Every few seconds, I'd sweep my light across the trees. Twice, I caught the eyes, once behind me, once off to my side, always the same distance, always watching. When I reached the old well, Duke suddenly stopped. He planted his feet and stared at the wooden planks covering it. Then for the first time that morning, he growled, low, deep, the kind of growl that doesn't sound like warning. It sounds like dread. From inside the sealed well, something whispered my name, not loud, not clearly, but it was my name. Duke yelped and ran for the house. I followed. I don't even remember crossing the yard. I got inside, locked the door, shut off every light, and stood in the kitchen holding my rifle like that would somehow matter. My wife woke up and asked what happened. I couldn't answer. Then my phone buzzed. Motion alert. The camera over the back porch had picked something up. I opened the video. At first, nothing moved. Just the yard, the barn, the dark line of trees. Then 2 green eyes appeared at the edge of the woods. The camera glitched. When the picture came back, the eyes were closer, standing beside the old well. Then the video ended. I didn't sleep after that. At sunrise, I went outside. There were tracks in the mud near the well. Not bear, not deer, not human. Almost human, maybe. Long, narrow, pressed deep into the ground. And the distance between each print was impossible. Like whatever made them had been crossing the yard in huge, silent steps. I didn't tell many people. Most would have thought I was crazy. But a few days later, I went back to that country store. The same old man was there. I didn't tell him everything. I just said, I heard something on the ridge. He didn't look surprised. He asked one question. Did it copy you? My mouth went dry. I said, yeah. He nodded slowly. Then he said, good. I stared at him. Good? He looked past me, toward the mountains. That means it was still learning. I asked him what happened when it was done learning. He didn't answer. He just got up and walked inside. That was almost 3 years ago. We still live on the property. Nothing has happened like that again. Not exactly. But sometimes, before sunrise, I hear voices up on the ridge. Almost words. Almost my wife's voice. Sometimes Duke refuses to go near the well, and every now and then, when I'm outside in the dark, I get that feeling again. Watched, measured, copied. Last week, I found something carved into one of the wooden planks covering the well. 3 words. Fresh, deep. Cut into the wood like someone had used a knife. Almost got it. I don't go outside before sunrise anymore, and if I hear someone talking in the woods, I obey. I'm 29 years old now, and my family still won't let me tell this story when the younger kids are around. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every family reunion. If this night ever comes up, somebody changes the subject. Or my aunt looks at me and says, "Don't start." Nobody laughs. Nobody says I imagined it. Nobody says I was just a kid. They just don't want it spoken about. When I was 10, I thought they were overreacting. Now I think they were afraid I'd remember too much. I grew up for a few years in eastern Kentucky, tucked into the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. We lived in what everybody back home called a holler. If you're not from around there, picture a dead-end pocket of land squeezed between 2 wooded hills, a handful of homes, mostly family, no real traffic except people who belonged there. Our double wide sat near the middle of it. To the left was my uncle's place. Down the road were cousins. Across from us was nothing but a creek, a ditch, and trees climbing straight up into the dark. Behind us was more woods. At 10 years old, I loved it. I could run barefoot through the grass, pick blackberries until my fingers were stained purple, and sleep outside with my dad when the weather was good. But my grandma had rules, real rules, not suggestions. The first day I moved in, she sat me at the kitchen table and made me repeat them back to her. Don't go into the woods alone. Don't mess with wild animals. Don't whistle after sundown. If you hear someone call your name from the trees, don't answer. And then the one I never understood. If you see someone in the woods that you think you know. She paused long enough that I looked up from my cereal. No, you didn't. I laughed. She didn't. I asked her what that meant. She just reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and said, "You come home, straight home." No story, no explanation, just that. You come home. The night it happened was in August. Hot, sticky, stormy August. My dad and I had a little campsite cut into the tall grass and blackberry bushes about a quarter mile from the house. It wasn't deep woods, not really. We could still see the porch light through the trees if we stood in the right spot. That night, we had a fire going. Dad was drinking beer, I was roasting hot dogs, and the woods sounded normal. That's something people who don't spend time outside don't understand. The woods are loud. Cicadas, crickets, frogs, wind moving through leaves, the creek running along the road, the fire snapping every few seconds. There's always sound. Then my dad stood up and said he was going back to the house to grab more beer and check on Grandma. Before he left, he pointed at me and said, "Don't mess with the fire." I rolled my eyes and said, "I know." He disappeared up the trail with his flashlight. For a few minutes, everything was fine. Then the woods started going quiet. Not all at once, slowly, like something was turning the volume down. The bugs stopped first, then the frogs, then the wind. Even the creek started sounding far away, like it had moved half a mile down the road. I remember sitting there with a hot dog stick in my hand, suddenly very aware that I was alone. Then I tasted it. Metal, sharp and bitter, like I had bitten my tongue, except I hadn't. It crawled up the back of my throat and made my eyes water. A minute later, Dad came back. He was mad before he even reached the fire. "What did you throw in there?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Don't lie to me. I can smell burning metal all the way up the trail." I pointed at the fire. There were no cans in it, no trash, nothing but wood. Dad stared at the flames for a few seconds. Then his face changed. He looked toward the trees. The wind picked up suddenly, and somewhere far off, thunder rolled over the hills. He said, "Storm's coming, pack up." We left the tent. We left the chairs. We grabbed what we could and started walking back. By then the rain had started, not pouring yet, just enough to make the leaves hiss. I remember eating a piece of watermelon as we walked because Dad had cut one earlier and left slices in a cooler near the trail. That detail sounds stupid, but I remember it perfectly. The sweetness of watermelon, the rain, the taste of metal still stuck in my mouth. Then lightning flashed. For 1 second, everything lit up bright as noon. The yard, the road, the creek, the first line of trees. Then black again. A few seconds later, lightning flashed again, and I saw something standing at the tree line across the road. Not clearly, just a shape. Tall, still, wrong. I stopped walking. Dad was a few steps ahead and didn't notice. The thunder hit, and everything went dark again. I told myself it was a stump, a branch, my eyes playing tricks. Then the lightning came again. It was closer. Not much, but closer. Standing beside one of the trees now. Its head was too large for its body. Its arms were too long. Its torso looked bent, like the bones had been put together by somebody who had heard what a person looked like but had never seen one. The metal taste got stronger. I whispered, "Dad." He turned around, annoyed. "What?" Lightning flashed again. This time the thing was standing in the middle of the road. No sound, no footsteps, no splash from the wet pavement. Just there. Dad saw it. I know he did, because his face went completely blank. Then he grabbed my arm so hard it hurt and said, "Inside, now." We ran. Not all the way. Dad wouldn't let us run all the way, like he was afraid fast movement would make it follow. But we moved quick. When we got inside, Grandma was washing dishes. She looked at us once and turned the water off. "What happened?" Dad didn't answer. I said, "I saw somebody." Grandma's face changed immediately. Not confused, not curious, scared. She looked at Dad and said, "Lock the house." Dad was drunk enough to be clumsy, but sober enough to obey. He locked every door, every window, even the little bathroom window nobody used. Grandma pulled every curtain closed. Then she made me sleep in her room. I kept asking what it was. Nobody answered. Sometime after midnight, I woke up because Grandma was sitting on the edge of the bed. She was facing the window. The room was dark, but lightning was still flashing now and then. I whispered, "Grams?" She didn't look at me. She just put one finger to her lips. Then I heard it. From outside, very soft. My dad's voice, calling my name, but my dad was asleep in the living room. I could hear him snoring through the wall. The voice outside called again. Same voice, same exact tone, like it had practiced. Grandma reached over and covered my mouth with her hand. Not hard, just enough. Her hand was shaking. The voice called a third time. Then something tapped on the window. Once, twice, 3 times. Grandma started praying under her breath. The tapping stopped. The next morning, the tent was ruined. The door wasn't cut. It wasn't clawed. It was pulled apart. Like someone had grabbed both sides and ripped it open with their hands. My uncle lived about a mile up the holler. All 8 of his chickens were dead. Heads gone. No blood. Not on the ground. Not in the coop. Nowhere. For the next 3 weeks, none of the kids were allowed outside alone. We had to wait for the bus with adults. My dad was late to work every morning because he refused to let me stand by the road without him. Nobody explained anything. Every time I brought it up, the subject changed. If I asked Grandma, she'd say, "You saw enough." If I asked Dad, he'd say, "Drop it." Eventually, I did, because kids do that. They accept silence when every adult in the room seems afraid of the same thing. Years passed. I moved away. I grew up. I convinced myself I had misunderstood what happened. Maybe it was a man. Maybe it was an animal. Maybe lightning and fear made it look worse than it was. Then, when I was in my early 20s, some cousins came into town around Halloween. We were sitting around telling scary stories, and I told that one. Not dramatically, not trying to scare anyone, just telling it. My aunt walked in halfway through. The second she realized what I was talking about, she got angry. Not annoyed, angry. She said, "Don't you tell them that." I laughed because I thought she was being dramatic. She pointed at me and said, "Don't you put that evil on them." The room went quiet. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You were lucky it didn't let you see its face." After that, nobody wanted to talk. Not my dad, not my aunt, not my cousins. And that's when I understood. They hadn't ignored me because I was a child. They had shushed me because they knew. A few years after Grandma passed, I helped clean out her house. In one of the kitchen drawers, underneath old church papers and recipes, I found a folded piece of notebook paper. It had my name on it. Inside were the rules. The same ones she made me memorize when I was 10. Don't go into the woods alone. Don't mess with wild animals. Don't whistle after sundown. If you hear your name, don't answer. If you see someone in the woods you think you know, no you didn't. Come straight home. But there was one more rule at the bottom, one she had never told me. The handwriting got shaky near the end. It said, "If it ever lets you see its face, don't come home." I sat there in her kitchen holding that paper for a long time, because for almost 20 years, I've tried to remember what I saw in that lightning. The shape, the arms, the head, the way it stood in the road. But I have never been able to remember its face, not once. And I don't know if that's because I forgot, or because it never wanted me to. So if you ever find yourself in the foothills of Kentucky and someone's grandma gives you rules that sound strange, listen to her. Don't whistle after dark. Don't answer your name from the trees. And if lightning flashes and you see someone standing where nobody should be, know you didn't. I still can't figure out what I saw till this day. Only 2 people who know why I refuse to hike after dark. One of them was standing next to me the night it happened. The other one had never met either of us. That's the part that still bothers me. I grew up in southern West Virginia, where the mountains are just part of life. Every direction you look, there's another ridge, another patch of woods, another road that twists into trees so thick they seem to swallow your headlights. If you've never been in those woods after midnight, it's hard to explain the darkness. It's not normal dark. It's the kind of dark where your flashlight doesn't feel like it's lighting the woods. It feels like it's only showing you the first few feet of whatever is waiting behind it. I wasn't scared of the woods back then. I hunted with my uncle, fished with my grandpa, camped out behind friends' houses. I knew what foxes sounded like. I knew coyotes. I knew owls. I knew the difference between something moving through leaves and something stalking through them. Or at least I thought I did. My best friend, who I'll call Mark, came over one Friday night. We did what we always did back then. Watched fights, played Xbox, ate junk food, talked about leaving West Virginia like every bored 20-something does. By the time we finally checked the clock, it was a little after 1 in the morning. Neither of us was tired. Mark said, "Let's walk Ridge Hollow." Ridge Hollow was a short trail, maybe 10 minutes from my house. During the day, people walked dogs there, rode 4-wheelers nearby, sometimes took kids down to the creek. At night, nobody really went there. Not because anything had happened there. At least, nothing people talked about. It was just too dark, too closed in. But we were young and bored and stupid, so we drove out there. The parking area was empty when we pulled in. No cars, no lights, just the trees on both sides of the trail, and the sound of bugs so loud it almost felt fake. We started walking. The first half hour was normal. The woods were alive, crickets, tree frogs, leaves shifting. Something small running through brush every now and then. There was a creek somewhere off to the right, low and steady over the rocks. That kind of noise makes you feel better in the woods. Silence is what makes the woods feel wrong. We got about halfway down the trail and stopped near this small clearing where the trees opened just enough to see a little piece of sky. Mark packed what we came there to smoke, and we stood there talking quietly. Nothing deep. Work, girls, music. Whether we were ever actually going to move away or just keep saying we would. Then Mark stopped talking. He turned his head slightly, like he'd heard something behind me. I asked, "What?" He didn't answer right away. He just listened. Then he said, "Do you hear that?" I listened. "I don't hear anything." He looked at me. Exactly. That was when I noticed it. The woods had gone completely quiet, not quieter, quiet. No crickets, no frogs, no creek, no leaves. Even the air felt still. It was like somebody had dropped a glass bowl over the whole forest. I remember laughing a little, but it wasn't because anything was funny. It was that nervous laugh people do when their body is already scared, but their brain is trying to catch up. Then we heard the voice. It came from somewhere farther down the trail. Not close, not far. Just out there. At first, I thought it was a person. Then I realized it didn't sound right. It was shaped like a voice, but not exactly a voice. Like someone was trying to talk through an old, broken speaker. The pitch kept changing. High, then low, then high again. It almost sounded like words, but every time my brain tried to understand them, they slipped apart. Mark whispered, "What the hell is that?" I shook my head. The voice continued. Same volume, same distance. Not moving closer, not moving away, just repeating. A shaky, uneven string of sounds that felt almost human. Almost. That almost is what made it worse. I whispered, "Maybe it's someone messing with us." Mark said, "At 1:30 in the morning?" Neither of us moved. Then the voice changed. It got softer, not quieter, softer, like it was trying to sound friendly, like it had realized we were listening. Then, buried in the noise, I heard something that made my stomach drop. It sounded like my name. Not perfect, not clear, but close enough. Mark looked at me. I could barely see his face, but I saw enough to know he heard it too. Then the voice tried again. This time it sounded like Mark's name, but wrong, stretched out, like someone repeating a word they had only heard once. Mark said, "We're leaving." We started walking back the way we came. Not running yet, just fast. The voice kept going behind us. Same distance, same volume. That was the first thing that made no sense. We were moving away from it. The trail bent. Trees got between us. We were walking fast enough that our shoes were slipping on dirt. But the voice did not fade. It stayed right behind us. Not louder, not quieter. Exactly the same. Mark whispered, "Don't look back." Of course, the second he said that, I wanted to. I held off for maybe 10 seconds. Then I turned. I didn't see anything. Just the trail disappearing into blackness, but the voice stopped the moment I looked. That silence was worse. I turned forward again. The voice started back up immediately, right behind us. Mark heard it too, because he said, "Run!" So we ran, full sprint. Branches slapped my arms, rocks rolled under my shoes. I could hear Mark breathing beside me, sharp and panicked. The voice followed, same volume, same distance. No footsteps. No crashing through brush, no signs of anyone running behind us, just that voice, floating after us like it was attached to the air. At one point, Mark tripped and went down hard. I grabbed his hoodie and yanked him up so fast I probably hurt him. He said, "It's still talking." I said, "Don't listen." But I was listening. I couldn't help it. The voice was changing again. It wasn't just nonsense now. It was imitating things. A laugh. A cough, a sound like someone crying. Then suddenly, my mother's voice, just one word, my name, clear as day. I stopped for half a second, not because I believed it was her, because hearing her voice out there in those woods at that hour broke something in my brain. Mark shoved me forward and yelled, "That is not your mom." That snapped me out of it. We kept running. The trail felt longer than it had on the way in, way longer. Every bend looked wrong. Every tree looked the same. I started thinking we had somehow missed the exit. Then I saw the faint gray opening where the trail widened near the parking area. I almost cried from relief. We burst out of the woods, bent over, hands on knees, gasping for air. The parking lot was maybe 5 minutes ahead down the access path. For a few seconds, everything was quiet. Normal quiet. The kind where you can hear your own heartbeat in your ears. Mark said, "Dude?" I said, "Don't." He said, "That was somebody, right?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say it was some drunk guy, some idiot with a speaker, some local messing with people. But before I could answer, the woods behind us exploded with a scream. I have heard animals scream. I know what foxes sound like. I know what coyotes sound like. I know bobcats and owls and cats fighting. This was not that. This was rage, pure rage. It sounded like a person being murdered and the murderer screaming at the same time. It was so loud, I felt it in my ribs. Birds burst out of the trees all at once, wings beating everywhere. Mark actually dropped to the ground and covered his head. I couldn't move. The scream went on too long, longer than lungs should allow. Then it cut off, instantly, like something had closed its mouth. We ran to the car. Neither of us spoke. Mark fumbled the keys so badly I had to take them from him and unlock the doors myself. When we got inside, he started the car and reversed so fast, gravel sprayed under the tires. We didn't turn the radio on. We didn't talk. We just drove. When we got back to my house, we sat in the driveway for almost 10 minutes. Finally, Mark said, "We're never going back there." I said, "Never." And we didn't. For a while, I tried to explain it away. Maybe somebody had followed us. Maybe someone had a speaker hidden in the woods. Maybe we were high and scared and made it worse in our heads. But that didn't explain the silence. It didn't explain the voice staying the same distance. It didn't explain my mother's voice. And it sure didn't explain the scream. A few months later, I was getting gas at a station outside town when an older man noticed the mud on my truck and asked if I still hiked around Ridge Hollow. I said, "Not anymore." He looked at me for a second too long. Then he asked, "You here talking?" I felt my stomach tighten. I said, "Yeah." He didn't look surprised. He just sighed and looked toward the tree line beyond the road. Then he said, "You're lucky." I asked, "Lucky how?" He looked back at me, because if it was still talking, it was still learning. I didn't say anything. He started walking away. I called after him, "Learning what?" He stopped beside his truck, one hand on the door. Then he said, "Your voice." He got in and drove off. I never saw him again. That was years ago. Mark and I don't talk about that night much. When we do, it's never for long. But sometimes one of us will text the other out of nowhere with just one sentence. "Do you remember how loud it was?" And the other one always answers the same way. Yeah. Because that's the part neither of us can forget. Not the voice, not the woods going quiet, the scream, the way it sounded furious that we got out. Like whatever was in those trees had almost figured us out. And we left too soon. I still live in West Virginia. I still love the mountains, but I do not walk trails after dark. I don't care how short they are. I don't care who I'm with. And if I'm ever in the woods and everything goes quiet at once, I leave. Because there are things out there that don't chase you at first. They listen, they practice, and if you hear your own name coming from the dark, keep walking.